Just in time for your weekly most comprehensive look at the world of business and economics. Welcome to Business Redefined. We are focusing on the automotive industry in Kenya, and in particular the draft policy, which we are told is now before the National Assembly, and we are privileged to have the Chief Administrative Secretary in the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Enterprise Development, Lawrence Karanja. Welcome on set.
Thank you.
Let's just begin with the policy itself. As we stand, where has it reached? Because I remember we've been covering this from as far back as early 2019.
Yes, as you are aware, the policy was developed. That is the Automotive Policy. And this was in consultation with all stakeholders. We went collected views from the vehicle manufacturers, from the Kenya auto, the people who operate auto bazaars, the manufacturers, and other people who are interested, different stakeholders. And after correcting the views, we came up with automotive policy. When it was ready, again, we subjected it to public participation, going back to the people, telling them that these are suggestions you gave, you okay with it? And when we subjected to public participation, we prepared it, processed it, and forwarded it to the cabinet. I'm happy to inform you that about 2 weeks ago, the cabinet approved the automotive policy, and now it is headed to the National Assembly so that it can be adopted. And once it is adopted, it will become a session paper which will be guiding how we shall be operating in future in the automotive sector.
Let's delve into the aspect of the fact that the utilization of local assembly capacity is very, very low. We're talking about, from the latest data that I've seen, is actually down to just about 20%, having come down from as high as 32% in 2015. What informs this underutilization of the local assembly capacity?
Today, if you ask an ordinary Kenyan in the street where he wants to buy his vehicle, he'll be looking for an imported car. And that is the biggest challenge we are having, that the competition from the imported vehicles, second-hand vehicles. When we liberalized the economy, something happened. We allowed importation of second-hand vehicles. And from that time, the production and utilization of the local capacity started going down. And as you have correctly said, it's right as we speak, it's below 30%. That means our 3 assemblers, they are operating at about 30%, which is a great... the main reason for this, and we've been seeing, is the price variance between imported second-hand vehicles and new vehicles. And the challenge we have thrown to our assemblers and our manufacturers is, can you try and come up with a vehicle which can compete with imported vehicles? That is in terms of quality and in terms of price. And striking that balance has been the most difficult thing. But I can tell you there is hope, and because 2 weeks ago we launched motor vehicle, the price will be ranging for a brand new vehicle between 1.1, that is 1,150,000 to 1.3. And looking at it, that is basically the price of a new imported vehicle.
But see, as the manufacturers will tell you, the assemblers, I should say, will tell you that it's really about the cost of doing business in this environment. I'll give you an example. In the Finance Act of 2020, we all know, for example, the electricity rebate granted to manufacturers was withdrawn. And that definitely has an impact in terms of their aggregate cost of production. So from a cost of doing business and business environment perspective, don't you feel then they table a compelling case when they are discussing issues of the challenges they face?
There are very major incentives for the complete knockdown. That is the vehicle which comes in small components. And many a times you'll find that for those vehicles, what comes in ranges between 60 and 70%. Then the 30% becomes local content. For those ones, they are offered a lot of incentives, including duty waiver for those spare parts, for those parts which come completely knocked down. So that what happens is that when they come here, there is assembly and also absorption of locally of local content. There is an ongoing conversation on what, especially for what we are calling the special economic zones. And I will give you an example of Naivasha, where you have the special economic zones. If you go to Naivasha, we have already a preferential tariff, which has been gazetted, such that if anyone was to set such a factory within our special economic zones in Naivasha, then he'll get that benefit.
Many Kenyans will tell you that duty on imported vehicles in this country is already quite high. And that explains why you will hear majority would prefer to go the Uganda route or whichever other route to get their vehicles. If that is the fact, and the market is still exhibiting high appetite for imported vehicles, don't you think that it is sending a signal to the policymakers such as yourself?
Even we see this, even after imposing heavy duty, the imported vehicles are still cheaper than locally assembled. And that's why I said until 2 weeks ago, we did not have a locally assembled vehicle which was retailing for anything below 1.5 million. So right now, this is the first time we are getting a good vehicle retailing at below that. Therefore, duty, because the duty we impose, the purpose of this duty is to protect local industry. But we have seen that even after imposing that, it has not been working. That is why we have told our manufacturers, can you come with a vehicle which is affordable? And I believe it's a journey of 1,000 miles which has started. We are now at 1.15. I believe in the near future, we might have one at 1 million.
Speaking about the horizon of incentives, one of the realities we are in right now is that the government is on a very aggressive push to scale back a number of incentives for obvious reasons, because the tax revenues are quite subdued in light of the COVID-19 environment. Looking ahead, do you see the incentives you're extending being threatened by this development?
They're not going to be threatened, because one thing is this, it's a balancing act. I call it a balancing act because if we are growing the automotive sector, there will be a lot of other indirect beneficiaries, jobs created, indirect opportunities. Therefore, the tax base will be widened. And if we widen that, and that is what we have been saying, we'll try as much as possible, we widen the tax base so that we relieve this pressure from the central investors. So that, and for instance, we have said about motor vehicles. If we have somebody who is assembling here, he gets those incentives. There will be other people who will be supplying him with those products. With them, we'll be able to collect tax. However, if we continue importing these vehicles, this vehicle as it comes, it's only, I would say, you collect revenue or duty at the point of import, and some retro tax from the person who is selling. But if we expand the automotive sector, I'm telling you, the number of people who will be supporting that sector, the tax base will be widened. Therefore, there will be no threat to the incentives we are already offering.
Some of the players in the automotive space will tell you that one of the key challenges they see in the industry is around the legal notices 363 and 489 of 1993. Could you just speak to this and why this is significant for the industry?
Sorry, which one?
The legal notices of 363 and 489 of 93. And the argument is that it has created an environment where manufacturers are not able to perform optimally as far as assembly of vehicles is concerned. Is this something perhaps you would like to comment on?
For us to protect the local sector, there are two things and that is what we are looking at doing. Either we increase duty on the imported vehicles, or we reduce the number of years. And we have been pondering which is which. If we increase the duties on the imported vehicles, then what it means, we will be making our country. If we increase the duties, if we increase duty for the imported vehicles, we might put some of the vehicles out of reach of the ordinary Kenyans. If we reduce the years, the same case, because duty is taxed, is based on the years. The lower the years of manufacture, the higher the duty. So we have been working on that, trying to strike a balance, and this is the conversation we are engaging now on how, because for us we have to protect the ROFCO industry. And it's a conversation we are saying it's not going to be tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but eventually we will have to do both, increase the duty and reduce the number of years. That is the only way we are going to protect our industries. Yeah.
Speaking about the age limit, we are currently, I think, at 8. The goal is to scale it down to 3. How are we moving progressively towards this target?
If you know very well, actually, the goal was to reduce it to 5 years by 2020. But after a discussion with the importers and our manufacturers, the period was extended. And therefore, we want, once the automotive policy is adopted, we will sit down and come up with an effective date, so that the first thing will be to reduce it to 5. For now, it's still at 8. Then we'll go to 5 and eventually at 3. Why do you want it to eventually to leave it at 3? Because at 3 years, that vehicle, the price will be as good as the price will be competing with the locally assembled vehicles. But in fact, at that time, going by the potential we have seen from the industry, because right now, you have seen the vehicles, the ones which are being assembled, are competing with those ones which are 7 years. Therefore, when we reduce it to 5, we are certain people will start preferring local vehicles other than imported.
All right. One of the key challenges that assemblers will tell you exist in this market is the pervasive nature of counterfeit products. Yes. What are you doing about this?
It's a very, very serious challenge, and counterfeit. And the truth of the matter is that the counterfeit are not mainly done here. Most of them are imported. But we already have an agency called Anti-Counterfeit Authority, which is working very hard to bring to an end this business of counterfeit and illicit trade. Last year, we destroyed goods worth about almost 500 million of goods confiscated at various ports. We are liaising mainly with the intellectual property owners, that is the franchise owners, so that we can work closely. Because what is happening is that our people are also seriously encouraging the counterfeits, because you know, we go to buy a certain spare part. You know for sure, if you go to the genuine dealer, it goes for about maybe 10,000, and you are told there's somewhere where it's going for 1,200, and you go and buy it. Many a times, and counterfeit, I would say this, counterfeit sometimes doesn't mean that it is substandard. Sometimes it's up to the standard, but only that it is a stolen intellectual property, that the intellectual property is not enjoying the benefit of his work. Therefore, our Anti-Counterfeit Authority and our officers in that agency are on the field looking for those counterfeits. They are stationed at all places. We have them doing surveillance. We have some at the points of entry and other places. And any time we get the counterfeit goods, to give assurance to intellectual property owners, we ensure that we arrest, prosecute, and eventually damage those counterfeits. And the intellectual property owners still have a right to sue the counterfeiters for the loss which they might incur.
One of the biggest hopes around those who are eagerly anticipating the adoption of the automotive policy is that it will give guidance regarding the regulatory framework of the CKD sphere that's completely knocked down.
Yes.
Is this a hope which we should continue to nurse, or how is it being handled?
Yeah, what happened is that, the issue of the complete knockdown and the semi-knockdown, this is something we have been working on and looking on ways to encourage, because we have the SKDs, because our hope and aspiration is to have CKDs, and therefore to encourage more people and more investors to set up their factory where they will be doing CKDs. We have come up with those regulations, and the other, and in the automotive policy, we have set out the framework and the vision and the timelines within which we shall come up with the regulations.
If I recall very well, in the draft automotive policy document, one of the issues raised was poor enforcement and lack of clarity as far as the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act is concerned, regarding the preferences and reservations for local goods, such as now the assembly we're talking about. Would you just care to comment on how this is impacting the industry and what we're doing?
The government and the government agencies have given preference to locally assembled vehicles. In fact, we no longer buy imported vehicles. We only buy locally assembled vehicles. The second thing I would want to make it clear in the procurement, last year our ministry came with a list of 334 goods which are supposed to be given what is called preferential treatment during the procurement. Amongst these goods are motor vehicle automotive spare parts. The reason is because we looked at it and we found that in some areas we are self-sufficient. Therefore, if we are able to do some parts and we don't need importation, therefore, whenever we are procuring such goods, the procurement rules are supposed to give favor to locally assembled parts. Number two, to protect local manufacturers. For those goods, we'll be imposing heavier duty than other products, because we know these are not, we are not importing because we need them. We are importing just to come and compete with the local manufacturers.
If you remember the 8-point COVID-19 economic recovery agenda, manufacturing was there, and the president was very clear that I think a little in excess of $500 billion shillings was designated.
600 million.
Exactly, towards the recovery of the automotive and assembly in particular. How was this deployed? To which areas, specific areas was it targeting?
This was meant, it was on need-to-need basis from various government departments, so that once we evaluate and we find that this department doesn't have enough motor vehicles or is in need of motor vehicles, you allocated the number of vehicles, and thereafter you're supposed to procure them. But these vehicles were supposed to be, the requirement was they must be locally assembled. So the procurement was meant to support the local automotive sector, and it has gone. That would be quite a number of vehicles which were being purchased, and the process is still going on, because it's even if you are to buy it, you have to go through the procurement process. You tell us how much you supply us, how much, because we have, as I said, we have 3 known assemblers, and the others who are still setting up their bases. Therefore, it is a process we are going on. It's going on, but it is really went. It was a big cash injection to our automotive sector. My final question, CAS. One other challenge which has been raised to me is the fact that a number of franchise holders, from time to time, will import parts which they could otherwise locally source. And that clearly negates the gains being made by the industry. Is this something you're aware of, and what's being done about this? What you have said is true, that there are some of the franchise holders who have not set up local factories or local industries to manufacture some of those spare parts. And what we are doing is just we continue to encourage them either to set up their factories themselves, and we are, as I said, we are offering to give them some preferential incentives so that they can set up. The other option for them, and this is what we are actually really encouraging them, is to partner with locals that can give them franchise, and that way they'll create employment. There will be, as I said, there will be transfer of skill, and we'll be saving a lot of the foreign currency which we spend by going to buy those spare parts, which I honestly believe, and we have the capacity to do them locally, because our manufacture, as a country, we boast of one thing: we have very energetic youth and also extremely skilled. Therefore, setting up those factories, those are things you never shortfall of. That you say you don't have a manpower, you'll always have trained manpower. And those who you think they may require specialized skills, they already have the basics. So it will take very little time to train them to get to the standard any automotive dealer or in this world want, because we have them. They are in all those major automotive. You name them, go anywhere, you'll find Kenyans working there. Therefore, that tells you if they have been able to go and work there, they can still work here and do the same good job they are doing out.
All right. And that point by CAS Lawrence Karanja takes us to the close of our conversation on Business Redefined, where we have been looking at the automotive industry in Kenya, and in particular the draft policy, which, as we are told now, is before the House, the August House, I should say, which is Parliament. Up next is the Markets Report.